Doesn't it seem safe to say this 2024 NFL draft was very different for the New Orleans Saints? Whether we will one day look back upon this draft with as much fondness as 2006 or 2017 is a bit much. But there's little question this might be the best all-name team the Black and Gold has ever managed, bringing in over a 3-day period. There's a Taliese, a drink you might find in a kindergartner's lunchbox, a dude named after a snake, and hey, Bob, we see you over there. How did they do? Are you ready to give out some grades? Well, there are people out there who will tell you not to drink the Kool-Aid, but those people will never be guests on this show. Hell, we have plenty enough sugar to keep you wired all day long, and it's coming up next on the Dattitude podcast.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, New Orleans? Hello to my friends elsewhere, everywhere, out there who are coming down from the big, easy overload of events this past weekend. Woo! First weekend of Jazz Fest, Zurich Classic, the NFL Draft, Pelicans getting their suitcases ready, the prep baseball playoff weekend series, you name it. That is what we do here, right? It's what we do for sure. Well, let's wrap it up here on Dattitude, episode number 233, brought to you by Evangeline Securities for a Monday, April the 29th, 2024, our final show of April. That's right, our final show of April. We'll be back on, when we come back on Wednesday, it will be May Day. Hard to believe we are running through it. Mini camps coming up. We are rolling. I am your host, Jim Derry. Whether you are watching on one of our NOLA.com social media channels or listening to the podcast, as always, I thank you for being a part of this show and a part of the Dattitude family. You know the drill. If you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on Facebook, X, doesn't matter. If you're watching live, you can type in your comment or question. We will see it here. We will put it on the screen. We will comment on it, I think, unless it's something ridiculous. A couple of you tweeted at me some things that I'm not going to read on the air here. Some bad words because you got mad at what I said about Spencer Rattler. I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's coming up because I want to start this show happy, happy, joy, joy, positive, because there are way more positives than negatives, in my opinion. Maybe only one negative. You might not think there are any negatives. You may be super thrilled about Spencer Rattler. Again, more on that coming up. If you're listening after the fact or have us on your podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, you can send in a comment via email at jderry@theadvocate.com. And a reminder, we like to give these friendly reminders. Just once I want to hear something I say, I want to be a jerk. Don't subscribe. No, we want you to subscribe. Please subscribe to the Dattitude YouTube page. Click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. Programming note this week, I didn't even tell Gabe this yet. We'll have a show Wednesday, which is going to be fun. Taryn Walk, who is the beat writer for Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons, the Dirty Birds, used to be here in New Orleans. I can't wait to talk to her about Michael Penix. That's going to be a lot of fun. Now, look, I'm gonna have to save the Michael. We'll have to save the Michael Penix stuff for later. We're not going to just dive right into Michael Penix. But we are going to talk about the Falcons. And actually, really, why I want Taryn to be here is not just the Falcons. I want to get her opinion on the NFC South as a whole. Who improved? Who's better in the NFC South? Are these odds right? Do we still think the Saints are 4-1 to win the division? Do we still think the Bucs are 3-1 to win the division? Do we still think the Falcons are the overwhelming favorites? Are the Panthers any better? So we're going to have a lot of fun on Wednesday. And then Friday, we're going to take a day off. I got some things going on, so there will be no show on Friday. Gabe just found out. There you go. No show on Friday. But what to start about today before we bring in Luke Johnson around 11:15. I want to talk about my friends at Evangeline Securities in just a minute. But first, the Zurich Classic. Did you watch any of it? Look, even if you're not a golf fan, it was great. It really was. First off, Jason Brown just made a big old pitcher of Kool-Aid. That's what you need to do. Sugar up before you watch this show. Sav thought it was a good draft. We'll find out in 2 years. You're right. I mean, we could sit here and do draft grades all day long. It doesn't really matter. The whole draft grade thing it's kind of overrated, but you got to do it. I mean, everyone does it. It doesn't matter. Grades don't matter. Well, if they don't matter, you wouldn't be watching this show or any other show or any other. You're watching draft grades all over. I did it. I went and watched what other people had on their draft grades. I find it interesting. It's entertaining. That's what that's supposed to be. I mean, all this talk anyway, if you're watching the show, you're pretty much here for entertainment purposes anyway. That's what we're trying to do. Zurich Classic, Rory McIlroy's first ever visit to New Orleans was certainly a successful one. He and partner Shane Lowry, the Irish duo, I didn't like when they were like saying after they won the tournament yesterday, there's going to be an Irish party on Bourbon Street. I mean, that is so old. I mean, I don't think there was an Irish. Weren't people dancing in Gaelic dresses, hopping up and down, leprechauns, hopping up and down. I mean, come on. They got on a plane, got the hell out of here. I mean, the closest thing to Irish dancing in this city yesterday was probably if I would have been walking up Salt Street over here in Mandeville. I mean, and I could barely walk right now. My back's still a mess. That's a whole different story. There's no Irish dancing on Bourbon Street. Give me a break. They did make one hell of a comeback, though. If you didn't see it, and you're judging by the ratings, you didn't. They came back from a deficit, sent the tournament into a playoff, and defeated Chad Ramey and Martin Traynor. Yeah, Chad Ramey and Martin Traynor. That duo. Just one extra hole needed. I did love Rory's comments about the city, though. Of course, he was raving about the food, and who doesn't? The food can't be beat in the city. Sorry, just can't. But he said the fans were welcoming in with open arms. I would have loved to have seen him. Zurich was a great class success again. 20th year as the Zurich Classic in New Orleans. I just wish it's such a rough weekend to have this tournament. We're at the mercy of the PGA scheduling. It is what it is. Maybe they can try to get out of that slot in the near future. It's not just the worst weekend to have it here, but with so much going on, but in the sports world in general. I mean, we talked about, I haven't seen the final ratings numbers, but they can't be good. It's 2 weeks after the Masters, sandwiched in between a couple of other signature events. Oh, the NFL draft and the NBA playoffs are all going on. But anyway, congrats to Rory and Shane Lowry. McIlroy's 25th overall win on the PGA Tour. It's probably not his last, but I can't imagine there are a ton more in his future. I just can't. Jerry, my friend, what you doing? Draft was awesome. I bet Jerry loves Spencer Rattler. You're going to get a little Derry downer in a little bit, but I'm telling you, it's going to be way more positive than negative. Really. It's going to be a lot of positive. I give Kool-Aid an A+, by the way. Get into that in a minute. Want to talk about some other things here this morning before we get to the Saints' thoughts. I'm going to tell you about my friends at Evangeline Securities. They are a local company. We're going to tell you a more expanded story about Evangeline, and not just the same one, but right now, I think it's important for you to know who they are. They are a local company founded in 2014 with offices on Poydras Street, right across from the Caesars Superdome. You know, you spend a lot of days there, at least 8 days a year, most of you 10 days a year, some other concerts. You want to Taylor Swift? I'm not a Swiftie. My girls want to go, but I don't have $2,000 to send them. What does Evangeline Securities do? Well, if you are a small or medium-sized family business and you're thinking of either selling or retiring, you're ready to get out, you're ready to do your own something different, or you're ready to just take it easy, go to Florida. Evangeline and its managing directors can help you figure out what to do to begin that process. How do they do that, you ask? Well, without getting into those fancy words, I told you last week, I'm not pronouncing fancy words. Simply put, they will come up with a detailed assessment of your business to first figure out its worth and go through their findings with you. Then when you are ready to proceed, they will run a free extensive auction process among hand-selected investors from around the world. Not just here in New Orleans, not just in New York, not just wherever. Around the world, they will find your best potential buyer. We'll talk about it a little bit more later in the show. In the meantime, you can check out Evangeline Securities you see it on there, right on the screen. Visit evangelinesecurities.com. Okay. Got to briefly talk about the Pels. I think I'm contractually obligated to talk about the Pels. Maybe not, but we're going to talk about them anyway. Remember when I was telling you a few weeks ago how big of a value they were? Yeah, not so much. I was wrong about that. Well, that was before I knew about Zion. But is Zion that damn important to this team? Gabe says thunder up and get out the brooms. I mean, how can you disagree with that? They were a no-show Saturday. I mean, they played okay for the first quarter and three quarters, but you know, there's a play, and I was listening to Graffinini on the way home. I had to call a playoff game, a prep baseball playoff game on Saturday afternoon. And when I got in the car, it was like there were like 3 or 4 minutes left in the second quarter. And there was some call that didn't get called or something against JV. And he got slapped across the face. I don't know, whatever it was. But Graf kept going on and on and on and on and on about it. And the Pels obviously took it to heart and it bothered them. They were never the same after that. They stunk. They stunk up the joint. How do you score 85 points? I don't care who's there and who's not there. How do you score 85 points? I don't know. That's my take on the Pels. They're going to be done tonight. I'd be surprised if they're not done tonight. I mean, I'm not betting on them or against them. Maybe they'll win one and then go lose in Oklahoma City on Wednesday, and we'll bring it up for a minute on Wednesday. I don't know. But if they play like they played in the game 2 or game 3, it's going to be over. They play like they played in game 1, maybe they'll win. Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. Let's move on to what y'all want to hear about. Saints. Devon says we needed a young middle linebacker more than linebacker. That'd have been like the 5th position I would have picked before. No. I love you. Thank you for joining the show. They did get a linebacker later. You can't draft a linebacker with that pick. I mean, there's a reason why they drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry. If we would have put percentages on the chances that Marshon Lattimore was going to leave after this season, before the draft, I would have said about 50 to 60%. Now it's like 98%. I mean, Marshon Lattimore is gone. I mean, he's gone. 98%. And that might be shorting it. I mean, there's a reason. They know internally that he's gone. Otherwise, they wouldn't have drafted Kool-Aid there. But regardless, even if for some reason that he stays, that Lattimore stays post June 1 and stays, it's still a great pick. I mean, what did they give up? They gave a 5th round and a 6th round pick. Who cares? To move up enough spots to be able to. Gabe can tell you back there in the green room that there's zero question that McKinstry would have been drafted by the Texans had he stayed on the board. Zero question. So there was no way they could sit there and wait if that's who they wanted. I think it was one of the best moves they've made since maybe 2017. We talk about, I give them grief for trading up sometimes, but that's where you trade up. And you only trade up a few spots to get a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry, who could be a starter on this team for 8-10 years from who knows. Regardless, he's going to come in and he's going to play on a rookie contract, whatever the contract is, and he's going to be a starter right away, and he's going to be important to this team. Luke's in the green room, but there is something I want to say because I know when Luke comes on, we're going to be like 90% positive. But I got to get my little thing out on Spencer Rattler. I gotta get it out there. I know the Derek Carr haters are excited and think Rattler is going to be some kind of savior. I've heard all sorts of really outlandish, unrealistic comments about Spencer Rattler. First off, the reason why I hate the pick so much and gave it a D- is that other than kicker or punter, there might not be a less pressing need on this team than quarterback. Like I said last week and 100 other times on this show, Derek Carr is not going anywhere anytime soon. That means you either drafted a backup, which also means you wasted last year's pick of Jake Haener, Or you have some delusions Rattler can someday be a starter in the NFL. There's a reason why 31 other teams passed on him that long. You are not smarter than a fifth grader. You now have 6 quarterbacks. Carr, Rattler, Haener. 5 quarterbacks. Carr, Rattler, Haener, Kellen Mond, and the recently signed Nathan Peterman. In other words, 2 are going to be cut, and either Haener or Rattler, likely Rattler, will be placed in the practice squad. Meanwhile, the only starting tackle you currently have on the roster is Fuaga, and a bunch of other guys who are either backups, hurt, or unsigned. What about another offensive lineman there? What about a running back, which you completely ignored in this draft? What about more depth in the defensive backfield? The word I heard most often over the course of the weekend, more than any other when it comes to Rattler, is, and it's one of the dumbest words in sports vocabulary, it's a 6-letter word that makes me cringe every single time I hear it. Upside. Upside. Doesn't every single player that was drafted this weekend have upside? You're so damn negative, Derry. Well, it's great to be positive. By all means, be positive. I wish I could see everything in a positive light, but I'm a realist. And reality is this. How many current starting quarterbacks in the NFL? And I'm not talking about Bailey Zappi, who's no longer a starting quarterback. How many current starting quarterbacks, including the ones that were drafted this weekend, in the NFL were drafted in the 5th round or later? Think about it for a second. Well, there's Brock Purdy. Yeah, and go ahead. I'll wait. I will stop your brain from bleeding. The answer is Purdy is a unicorn. He is the only one. So the Saints going to be able to do something with Rattler they haven't been able to do with anyone else? Here's a list of all the quarterbacks the Saints have drafted this century. It's not going to take me a long time. 2002, J.T. O'Sullivan. Oh, yeah, you forgot about him, didn't you? 2005, Adrian McPherson. Who? 2010, Sean Canfield. Yeah, Sean Canfield. 2015, Garrett Grayson, one of Sean Payton's little projects. 2020, Tommy Stevens. Wasn't he like Cat Stevens' grandson? I don't know. 2021, Ian Book. He's still probably trying to dodge Dolphins' edge rushers. Probably still having nightmares. And Jake Haener. Last year. Those worked out. I will reiterate the point. If the Saints were the Saints of old and a team that didn't have so many pressing needs, I wouldn't hate this pick nearly as much. But why waste a draft pick on something that will get the NFL Network talking about you on day 3 for 5 minutes? It's about the only thing it did. Makes no sense. That dropped the overall grade for this team, in my eyes, which is worth about as much as an unused ticket from Saturday's Pelicans game, from a solid A to a B. B plus if you want to be nice. We will find out over the next couple of years, maybe sooner, whether I am right or whether I'm wrong. I don't know. Let's bring in Luke Johnson, because I know he's going to have plenty to say about the Saints draft. Luke, man, you didn't wear the hat.
Sorry, I can go pull it out if you want.
Nah.
It looks a little bit better on a computer than it did on the phone, where it was like blown out. And
Yeah. That was pretty cool, by the way. Nobody knows what we're talking about, so we'll talk about some other things here. First, let's get some comments in. We had some that I waited. I don't know what this dude's doing. Youngster says the NFL must be eradicated.
All right.
All righty then.
Listening to the podcast, though, so.
I mean, yeah. Hakeem is giving me grief. Somehow I believe Haener has more up. No, I don't. I don't believe Haener has. The word upside is ridiculous to me. Everyone has upside. Everyone. Luke, is there a single person that was drafted this week and you think that has no upside? Not a single bit of upside?
Of course not. Of course not.
That's kind of my point.
I get the argument for quarterback, though. I'm going to push against your.
Please do.
A bit. Just like, I think it's a position that's worth a dart throw every couple of years, and there's a very good chance you're absolutely right, and 31 teams passed on him, and he's a bum, but I didn't
say that, but
well, I'm just saying I think it's such a valuable position, and if you get a dice roll and 1 out of 100 times it's right, it's the most valuable pick you ever make. So I have no problem with them taking a quarterback in the 5th round, a year after taking one in the 4th round, 3 years after taking one in the 4th round. Keep giving yourself the chances there. If somebody pans out, even if they're a decent backup, That is super, super, super valuable.
So, or we completely given up with Jake Haener? Saeed says he was a third-day pick. As far as defensive players, they can get the same in UDFA. The late you're throwing darts. So Saeed agrees with you. I'm just saying, if you're looking,
I don't think they've given up on Jake Haener at all. I think you give yourself as many cracks at it as you can because it's so valuable, and I think we have seen them find guys who can contribute in the undrafted free agent ranks. I think they got a couple this year who could potentially make the team. Granted, it was definitely not on. If you're looking at their hierarchy of needs, quarterback is not up there. They're not getting somebody to supplant Derek Carr. There's only one quarterback on the field at any given moment, unless you're talking about Taysom Hill. But it's this is a team that I think places a priority on value. It's why we saw him go get their positional value. It's why we saw him go get Kool-Aid McKinstry in the second round, even though they have 3 starting corners on their roster right now.
I'm going to get to Kool-Aid because I love that pick. I think you heard me. I think you came on before I started ranting about Spencer Rattler.
I'm with you, and that's why I think that you see him take a quarterback with their first day 3 pick. You see him take a corner with their second round pick. It's because they place a value on specific positions and they don't look at the immediate need right now. I think that's a smart way to build the team.
My last question on quarterback before we move on, because I want to spend way more time on the positive than the negative, because this was, in my opinion, a very good draft, especially at the top. I literally don't think they could have done any better with their first 2 picks. I mean, there is nothing they could have done that would made me feel better about what this team needed than what they did at their first 2 picks. So my last question about quarterback is, then why bring in Nathan Peterman?
I think Nathan Peterman first of all, they didn't know they were going to take Spencer Rattler.
Sure.
And I think both Nathan Peterman and Kellen Mond have some experience with this coaching staff. Not a bad idea to have guys who already have knowledge of the system, but I don't expect either of those guys to make the roster. I think it's going to be Carr, Haener, and Rattler. And you got the other guys there just in case something happens.
Well, if Peterman had a chance to make this team, I agree with you. I don't think he has a chance to make this team anymore. Jerry's saying hello. Jerry's always with us.
Hi, Jerry.
All right, let's get to the picks. And look, we spent a lot of time on Friday talking about Taliese Fuaga, but look, I think that when you talk about where the Saints were at 14, Fashanu probably would have been a better pick for the Saints. He was gone. So when it came to the Saints' time to draft, I think he was the perfect player for this team. He probably is a little bit more versatile than Fashanu, because I think Fashanu is a left tackle. That's what he is. That's what he's going to be in the NFL. I think Fuaga has a chance. I think he could play multiple positions on this line if you need him to. He'll probably come in and start at right tackle, assuming that Ryan Ramczyk can't get healthy for opening day. But if Ramczyk comes back, I think he can be moved to left tackle if need be.
Yeah, I think he can play there. I think the obvious best spot for him is right tackle. And that's why, like, when I was going into the draft process, I had just looking at guys who might be there. I had Fashanu first. I had Latham second, because I think Latham is a little bit easier to project left tackle because of his size, and then Fuaga there behind them. But obviously those other 2 guys were gone. And I think, like, you're talking about, like, small degrees of separation here. And just considering the state of the Saints offensive line right now, having a guy who could play maybe 4 positions on that line is a really, really good thing.
I agree.
And we'll see what happens. They're not done adding to this offensive line. I think we all knew that the post-draft free agency was going to be something that they looked pretty heavily at, just because they didn't know how it was going to play out in the draft. So I would imagine they're gonna sign somebody with some potential starting upside after the draft. Andres Pete is still out there. There's a couple guys with a lot of skins in the wall in the NFL, guys who can play in a pinch. They don't have their long-term solution at both tackles necessarily, right? I mean, Trevor Penning could still potentially pan out. You get him with this new coaching staff. He's got his first off season. Maybe he's I just don't think they can go into the season just like counting on that. Like, they need another body there who can play some starting reps.
Dattitude podcast on this Monday morning, brought to you by Evangeline Securities. Here with Luke Johnson, who is the one of the beat writers for the Times-Picayune, the Advocate, NOLA.com, here on this Monday morning. Luke, I think that one thing, I give the Saints grief at times, but maybe I don't give them enough credit. But I'm going to tell you this: one thing the Saints do, maybe as well as anyone, is they are great at drafting offensive linemen who can play multiple positions. We saw that with Cesar Ruiz not too long ago. Obviously, he came in; he was a center in college. He's probably better suited to be a center, to be honest. But they already had Eric McCoy, and you've seen that with James Hurst, who just retired. They brought him in. But they have always been really good at identifying linemen who can shift around and move around, and they have multiple linemen, I think, on this roster that can do that right now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's out of the question that Trevor Penning's their starting left guard.
I agree, for sure.
We've obviously never seen it out of him, but I think he's got the size and the temperament to play there, and maybe he's better suited to block interior guys than he is out on the edge. But yeah, I agree. The list kind of goes on with them. Andres Pete was drafted as a tackle. He played a lot of guard, played some tackle for him.
Yep.
They've done a nice job doing it. And I think they're still jury's still out on Nick Saldiveri, but he was a college tackle who they played at guard. And I think they drafted him kind of with the idea that it was going to be a redshirt year for him coming from I think it was Old Dominion. He came from small school.
Right, Old Dominion.
So he's a guy who I think we still haven't seen the best of. I think they kind of drafted him and stashed him. They didn't want to put him on the practice squad and let somebody else have a chance of taking him. But I think there's a chance he can play. So they've got some versatility there. But I think that the problem is, right now there's just so many questions about that. And they don't have, outside of McCoy and really, I guess you could say Cesar Ruiz. He had a down year last year, but he's played some good football. I don't know where anybody's going to line up. We don't know what's going to happen with Brian Ramczyk. We don't know what's going on with Penning. We haven't seen anything out of Saldiveri. They signed Oli Udo, who
I think Udo could play a big role in this team. We never talked about him at all, but
I think he's going to have to.
I agree.
So it's not necessarily as dire as there's this doomsday scenario for him. I think they could still have a decent offensive line, especially with the coaches they have. There's some really, really good offensive line coaches on this team, but we got to see it, and that's the thing. It's there's a lot of unknown with it right now.
Ryan Cabot, I see your comment. You're giving a grade. We're going to give a grade before Luke Johnson goes off, so I'll show it then. So I see your comment in the queue. We will put it up in a little bit. One more thing about offensive line. How important do you think it is? I agree with everything you said. I still think that this offensive line as a whole right now, minus Andres Pete, and you got to say minus Ryan Ramczyk, because I don't think anyone realistically expects him to be ready in September. He may never play another day in the NFL. That's where we are right now. But that being said, how important is it for this team, I think, to re-sign Andres Pete and get him back in? I would think that Pete wants to be back here, and I would think that overall the team wants him to be back here. So it's probably better than 50-50 chance that he comes back. But I think to make this offensive line, even if they're average, I think the offense can do what they need to do. If he comes back, I think maybe they are an average offensive line.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. But one of the things you got to consider with Pete too is that you can count on him to miss 3 or 4 games a year.
Yeah,
not more.
Exactly. And Udo comes in.
Yeah, and look, I think that the thing that I'm a little worried about with Pete is there's a lot of teams out there with tackle needs, and not everybody addressed it in the draft. Maybe teams were just kind of waiting to see what happened, like the Saints, waiting to see what happens in the draft, see what your holes are afterwards. And maybe there's a little bit more of a market for him now than there was 3 weeks ago. So that's a little bit of a concern. I'd put it maybe closer to 40-60, him being back.
Okay.
But obviously there's comfort level here with the staff, with the team. He knows who he's playing next to.
Well, one thing you talk about with new offensive line coaches, they may not want him back. We don't know.
That's true. That's true. He may not fit exactly what they want to do, but I think when you're looking at options that are available out there, and when you're looking at Andres' versatility, let's just say they bring him back, the idea of having him play left tackle,
right? And
then they get into training camp, and Trevor Penning is just wow, he's got it. The light bulb clicked on. You can move Andres Pete inside the guard
for sure.
He can play there. So
which would be fantastic, by the way. If
Yeah.
you could find a way to do that, Anders Peet comes back and you find a way to move him to guard. I mean, that only makes you even better, I think.
I agree. But I mean, this is all, we got to see how this plays out with this coaching staff, and again, exactly what they're looking for in that offensive line, because I think it's a little bit different than what we've seen them go after in the past.
Lots of time to go before we start figuring those things out. Derek Piedmont, I see your comment in the queue as well about undrafted free agents. I'm going to ask Luke his opinion on that in a minute, but I want to talk about Kool-Aid, and I want to spend 4 or 5 minutes talking about Kool-Aid. And again, we talked on the live 5-hour draft show on Thursday. We talked about lots of things. When you go 5 hours, you talk about who knows what. You talk about your mom and them and what you ate for breakfast. But I will say this. We said that if the Saints, what their needs were and what they might be more likely to pick, whether it be wide receiver, some other skill position player, or if you saw them draft a cornerback, it pretty much signaled the end of Marshon Lattimore. And them moving up to get Kool-Aid McKinstry, who was clearly a day one talent that slipped to day two. I think not only does it signal the end of Lattimore, but you could have a Kool-Aid kind of era. I mean, I think this guy could be, I don't want to say generational talent. That's a little bit much, but he wasn't, he wasn't the first defensive back off the board. But I think this guy could be a major impact for this team for a long time.
I agree. Well, with the second part, I agree. I think he's a really good player. I think he's just very solid across the board. The one thing you didn't see out of him at Alabama was like the ball skills, just picking passes off. I think he only had 2 in playing something like 40 games in his college career.
Yeah,
but he was always making plays on the ball. He just wasn't coming down with it. He had like 25 pass breakups, very smooth, very, very comfortable in press man, which the Saints love to play. They see him as like an inside outside guy. They like drafting these outside guys and seeing if they can play inside rather than playing somebody or drafting somebody who really has just one specific role that they can play. We'll see how that works out. It doesn't always work out with everybody, but they try to have the vision for a guy. So yeah, I mean, I think he's a really good player, really good find in the second round, at a premium position. And look, you look back, and this is why I don't think it's a given that they trade Lattimore. I mean, every year they've gone into this season with 4 or 5 deep at corner, feeling really good about it, and then by game 5, they're on their 6th corner.
Yeah,
I mean, I think just their history. I mean, like their history tells them you can never have enough good corners. I mean, it was just a couple of years ago they were going into it with like Alontae Taylor was a really promising rookie, and Paulson Adebo was coming off a great rookie season, and you had Lattimore, and you had Bradley Roby, and you had C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You had 5 guys, and they're like, hey, man, we feel good about it. We can trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson before the season, still feel good about our depth. And then like 4 games into the season, they're signing Chris Harris off the street to play starting snaps for him. So like, it's you can never have enough of these guys.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I think Kool-Aid's going to be a really, really good player, man. He was one of the top recruits in that class, and then he played like it at Alabama. You don't hear Nick Saban often give like ringing endorsements of defensive backs, so like the fact that Saban loves this guy, I think Saints fans are going to love this guy. I think he's going to come in, make a big impact right away, even if it's not like starting outside corner, even if they hang out. And look, Adebo is also a free agent next year, or he's set up to be a free agent. So I think you just got to be prepared here.
Yeah, and even if Lattimore stays, I mean, which is unlikely, but even if he stays, it's not like they don't need this guy. One thing, I have been, I mean, it's obvious, I've been overcritical of DA through the past year and a half or so, but I will say this. DA knows how to make young defensive players better, much better. We've seen that throughout, especially in the defensive backfield. And I don't know how he does it, but he's almost like a rookie whisperer of sorts. He has been outstanding in helping defensive backs grow on this team. And I think that's another major positive for this kid.
Yeah, I mean, I just referenced 3 of them, but look at the last high drafted corners they've had. And I'm not talking about like the Natrell Jamersons, even Jordan Howden, who I think had a solid season. He was a 5th.
Yeah, he did.
He was a 5th round pick, but like, look, Paulson Adebo I think he played at close to a Pro Bowl level last year. They got him in the 3rd round.
Alontae Taylor.
Taylor, yeah, some people thought that was a reach. He's been one of their best defenders last couple.
Agreed.
CJ Gardner-Johnson was 4th-round pick. It turned into like a Pro Bowl caliber player. He just signed a big contract in Philadelphia. They know what they're looking for in these guys. They know the mentality they're looking for. They know the traits they're looking for. They like length. Kool-Aid he's only 5'11", but he's long. He's got like 32, 33-inch arms, and something like a 76-inch wingspan for a guy who's 5'11". That's pretty big. So yeah, I think that they know what they're looking for, and they know how to coach these guys up. And that's why we've seen their secondary take such huge strides. I mean, it was awful when he took over, and they've been
really
very good for the last 4 years.
Luke, explain the situation of Marshon Lattimore and if he's traded. Some people, I mean, I think most people get it now why they couldn't trade him during the draft, but explain the whole post-June 1 thing.
Yeah, it was
as best you can.
The signal that they were open to trading him was when they did the conversion on his salary. They didn't just convert it to straight up signing bonus. They converted it to an option bonus, which means like the team who would be trading him would be able to pick up some of them. It wouldn't count like towards dead money.
Right.
They wouldn't, like the Saints wouldn't necessarily be on the hook for all the bonus that they converted. So that signaled to teams basically that he was available. But because of how much they've already converted, it's like the same as like a release. It's like the same as the Michael Thomas thing, where if they cut him that day, it would have been like a $25 million dead cap hit for that year. Whereas if they designated him a post June 1, it like they're splitting the cap charge up into 2 years. They still have to carry it all the way to June 1st. They have to carry Mike Thomas's like $12 million cap hit this year to June 1st. But after that, then they get some relief. So that's kind of how it would work for Lattimore. Is if they traded him during the draft, they would have had to account for $31 million this year. Whereas if they trade him after June 1st, they can split that up, and the cap charge becomes much more manageable between this year and next.
The salary cap is sort of like the IRS tax code. I mean, you need like specialists to figure it out. I mean, you guys deal with this all the time, and I mean, it's insane to figure out how to go through it and figure out what is what. I've been looking at it forever, and I still don't quite get it. I mean,
Kai Harley doesn't know that he made like a bunch of like accounting experts in the media corps, but he did. He's like teaching us direct.
No doubt. Look, let's talk about some of these other draft picks. We talked about the top 3. And I find them all interesting, actually. I mean, one of these 4 guys at least is going to make this team, I think. I went back and watched some highlights, and people were kind of making fun of Bub Means or whatever, but he's not a speedster by any means, I don't think, but by any means, get it? But he made some really tough catches last year for Pittsburgh that I went back. I'm like, almost kind of wow moments that I saw. And I think he could really become a 4th kind of option for this team.
I really like Bub Means. I think like if I'm looking at what I could envision for him this year, it's kind of like A.T. Perry last year.
Yeah.
A.T. Perry was a 6th-round pick who didn't get on the field early, but by the time he did, like he was ready and he was making plays. A different type of player though. A.T. Perry is kind of like a jump ball winner, like 6'3", long, wiry. Bub is like pretty compact. He's got good size. He's like 6'1", 212. And I think really strong hands, some really good run after the catch ability. And they use him as a downfield threat at Pittsburgh, but I really think that he could be kind of a underneath and intermediate option, get the ball in his hands and let him go. I think he's got a really good chance of making this team. Obviously we're going to see how it plays out once he gets down here. But just from the traits that I see now, and he's faster, I think, than you're giving him credit for. He ran like a 4.41 or.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. I thought it was more like a 4.48, a 4.41.
Yeah, no, he's a good player. Like I really think that they found maybe some teams didn't have the same type of evaluation. I think some people thought he might have been a little overdrafted in the 5th. But when you're looking at the type of traits he has and how they would want to use him in this offense, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I would not be shocked at all if he made the team, especially if he gives you some value on special teams as well.
Well, later on in the show, after you're gone, we're going to have in the extra point, we're going to talk about the 2006 draft, and Reggie Bush is the lead character in that. But there's a guy named Marcus Colston, you might remember, who was drafted in the 7th round, that draft. So the Saints have shown throughout their history since Sean Payton came here in 2006, they've been able to draft receivers late and turn them into starters. So I think he has every chance to make this team. And like you said, be A.T. Perry-like, at least follow in his footsteps and the way to make this team. So.
Yeah, I totally. And look, I think that, this is, I think, one of the arguments against all the trade ups they do and how they kind of look the day three picks are what they are. It's really hard to find a guy who hits, right? It's a lot bigger miss percentage on day 3 than it is the first 2 days of the draft. But I think they've done a nice job in, really since Jeff Ireland's been here, finding contributors day 2 and day 3 in the draft. They've been a lot better in those rounds than they have been in the first round, frankly. Just like first round, they take the big home run swings and it hasn't always worked out for them. But they find guys with traits who can, it's kind of like, I think about like our fantasy baseball league. We're in a rotisserie fantasy baseball league.
I'd rather not think about that right now.
There's 4 statistical categories. If the Saints in the day 3, like they find the guy who's a 1 or 2 category contributor, right? And they're like, okay, like he's not going to be this like star player, but like he's gonna help us here in this specific area. And
they are good at that.
And they find guys who can help them, right?
Yeah.
Useful players. They're not, I don't think Bub Means is going to be playing 70% of the snaps this year, but if he plays 15%, and on those 15 they find a good way to use him, I think it's a really good pick in day 3, good value.
Well, I think Christian Boyd and Josiah Ezram are probably both practice squad guys, but Jalen Ford is intriguing because a linebacker to me from a big name program such as Texas, I went back, looked at his highlights as well. I think he has the skills to maybe fit in and be a guy that, maybe starts off on special teams but finds his way into the lineup, and Saints have done that as well in the past. And so I think Jalen Ford, again, I like picking guys from big name schools. Now, obviously, the last 2 guys didn't do that later in the draft, but Jalen Ford to slip to the 5th, I thought that he kind of slipped a little bit.
Yeah, I think the reason he was there is because he didn't run very well at the combine. So maybe there's some concerns about his play speed at the NFL level. It's getting harder and harder for linebackers who are not fast to be really players you can count on to be like play starting level reps. But man, if his speed wasn't there, like you couldn't see it at Texas. He was super productive. And I think he still had some really good like athletic testing scores at the combine. It just wasn't speed. But like, I mean, you're talking about a guy in his last 2 years, 220 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, 6 interceptions. Like he's a playmaker there at Texas. It's not doing it at App State or, Eastern Kentucky or whatever. I mean, this is a guy who did it at a big time school against big time competition. And, not all those guys always translate, but like if it does, you got a really good pick there. And, Dennis Allen brought it up. DeMario's 35. Pete Werner's in a contract year. They signed Willie Gay to a 1-year contract. I mean, they have some young players who've played ball for him here, and Nephi Sewell, who's he's recovering from I believe it was an ACL. DeMarco Jackson, who they picked I think in the 5th round a couple of years ago, hasn't really gotten a chance to show what he can do on the field yet. They got some youth there, but like you really like what you see from Jalen Ford at Texas. Now it's just can that translate to the NFL where he's going to be going up against better athletes? I think we'll probably get a pretty good view of that right away in rookie minicamp.
Dattitude podcast of this Monday morning presented by Evangeline Securities here with Luke Johnson, Saints beat writer for the Times-Picayune, the Advocate, and NOLA.com. All right, before we I want to spend 2 to 3 minutes before I let you go talking about the undrafted free agents, but Brian has a grade. He grades the draft to C. I think that's a little rough. I give it a B+. I might have gave it an A. The whole Spencer Rattler thing really bothers me. We're not going to get into that again. But
he gave it a C because he gives every team a C because you have no idea what these guys are going to turn into, which is like.
Well, then, yeah. So, I mean, if you want to give a grade that really means something, who knows? Well, I'll be talking about this again. We talk about it 2 years from now. But right now, I give him an A+ on picks 1 and 2. Overall, I'll give him a B+. If you want to give him an A-, whatever. But I'm interested to hear your take. You cover him all the time. Your thoughts when you were watching this and going through and when they made selections, and now that you've had a day and a half to kind of think about it a little bit, what grade do you give this team?
Yeah, I give it kind of same range as you, like B plus A. Yeah, maybe I wanted one of the other tackles to fall at 14, but like it didn't happen, and they got absolutely the best one available at the spot, and it was such a huge necessity to get that. Maybe if two of them were there, maybe they would have considered trading back, but I think they did a smart thing and not try to accrue more picks because they needed a tackle so bad.
Yeah.
And then Kool-Aid McKinstry, number one, I really like the pick. Number two, I was thinking receiver in that spot, but like, man, the first like 4 picks of the second round, I think 3 of them were receivers. Yeah. And at that point, you're just
really surprised. Keon Coleman was the first pick of day 2.
Yeah, I thought Keon Coleman might be there. I really like Jalen Polk out of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Both those guys were going the first 3 picks of the second round. Ladd McConkey was gone. And then the end of the first round, you had Ricky Pearsall and Xavier Legette both go. You talk like 10 receivers gone in the first 37 picks. So like at that point, it becomes like, okay, who's the best player? Who plays a premium position? You go. You don't give up a whole lot to go get Kool-Aid. You still have 5 day 3 picks. I really like that pick. I personally also like the Rattler pick just because they didn't anticipate him being there. He's obviously not going to play this year unless something goes horribly wrong. But like, if he hits, great. If not,
right,
it's a day 3 pick, and a lot of those guys miss anyways. So I like that. I really like Bub Means. I think Jalen Ford has a chance if his athleticism is up to par. And then the last 2 guys, even those guys are traits guys. Like they don't have a nose tackle on this roster. That was kind of like a position that Malcolm Roach played last year. Right now they have 3 defensive tackles in the roster before they drafted Christian Boyd. Christian Boyd's like 325. He's a guy who's got like the run stuffer traits. Like he could potentially sneak his way on this roster if they don't continue to add to that. And then I really like. I think Azirum's going to be a practice squad guy, just because like he didn't start playing offensive line until like his junior year of college. He was a defensive lineman, but man, like when you're talking about like traits. He's huge. He's got like 85-inch wingspan. Like he's like JC Latham size, right? Like 6'6", 325 with an 85-inch wingspan, 35-inch arms. Like you have to coach him up. You have to teach him how to play the position. But like the traits are really, really nice to find in the 7th round. So like I actually really like that pick too, even if I don't think there's any chance he contributes to the team this year. But like you can stash him on the practice squad and train him up, and maybe you got a player there. So I think you could make a case for every single one of these picks that they made.
No doubt about it. And, another thing about the Kool-Aid McKinstry pick, if, they made the trade up to get him, had they, had for some reason, I think they made the trade even before Philadelphia made their pick, but had Philadelphia taken Kool-Aid, then the Saints would have taken Cooper DeJean. So it would have worked out just as well.
Well, and look, they traded up 4 spots, and then like Philly took DeJean, they took Kool-Aid, and then like I think 2 more went right after that. So if they would have stuck at 45,
they would have never. Yeah, the Texans certainly would have. Like I said, Gabe's in the Texans fan in the green room. Absolutely, there's no question that they would have taken him. All right, I want to get a couple minutes here before I let you go. I do want to talk about the undrafted free agents that they brought in so far. And Derek asked the question earlier: does Holker of Colorado State, the tight end, make this team? Why wasn't he drafted? Because I agree. I think this is a guy that could make this team.
Yeah, he absolutely could. I think if you're looking at why he wasn't drafted, I think it's probably because he's like it's kind of like a lot of these guys the Saints find in the undrafted free agent ranks. They look at the one thing they do well. Well, the one thing he does well is he can run and catch the ball. But like I don't know if he's like up to par as like an NFL level blocker. He reminds me a lot of like Lucas Krull a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Really big numbers at Pitt. Obviously has some pass catching talent, but like he's kind of a one-trick pony there. So they do have like Juwan Johnson as kind of like a pass catching tight end on this roster. They do have Foster Moreau as like the more traditional inline blocking tight end. Do they keep a third one who is, because I don't think he's going to beat out either of those 2 players.
Right.
Do they keep a third one who's like a kind of another pass catching option? I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell in this new offense. I do think though that like he has ability. And like you saw, like if you watch the Colorado game last year, he went off in that game. So he's definitely one of the more interesting ones in this class. I think, a guy who has an opportunity to make the club.
Who else do you like? A name that sticks out to me. I like Millard Bradford because he spent, he's an experienced kid who spent a lot of time at TCU, played for a team, obviously went to the national championship game. I think he's an interesting prospect. What names on this undrafted free agent list do you like?
Jermaine Jackson, for one.
Okay.
Small. He's like 5'7", 175, but you're looking at what has the Saints team done in the undrafted free agent ranks the last couple of years.
Found guys who can return kicks.
All-pro returner in Deontay Hardy. They signed a Pro Bowl returner in Rashid Shaheed. And then they're changing the NFL kick return rules this year. And you got a guy who averaged 30 yards a return in college on kick returns. He averaged 17 yards a punt return in college. He had 4 return touchdowns. So like they don't care about how little he is if he can return the ball. And that would be his only role on the team. But like, especially if Shaheed is going to be your number 2 wideout, do you really want to keep using him on returns? If you got another guy who can add to that, man, I really like his chances if he can continue to do that at the NFL level. And the other one I like is, they got another Aussie punter. Lou Headley was, I know they stuck by him all year, but like just the fact of the matter is that, he was bottom in the NFL in just about every punting metric. And and those styles different and they don't ask him to do a whole lot, but like net punting, average punting, hang time, about the only thing he was up in the middle or top half in was punts down inside the 20. I mean, they got competition there. Another Aussie punter,
Matthew Hayball of Vandy, you're talking about.
Yes, but a guy who, I think he was like 6th in college football last year in net punting average. Right up there in average. Ray Guy finalist. I think he's got a chance to beat him out. And the fun thing about it right now is they've got 4 specialists on this team, and 3 of them are international.
Right.
That should make for some fun stories during Rick and Minicamp.
Yeah, I think there will be a new punter on this team. That's just my opinion. Maybe not. But
it may not be either of those 2 guys. I think they've got to get better there, especially if I mean, field position is really important to this team, right? So it's just they've got to get better there. Maybe Lou Headley's improved this year, but like I think you got to give him competition.
One thing I will say is we're gonna have Taryn Walk on the show on Wednesday, not just talk about the Falcons, but to talk about the NFC South in general. And I think that the one thing that the Saints, I think you could say the Saints are a better team today than they were Thursday morning, in my opinion.
Yeah. But like, that's because they at least have one starting tackle now.
Yeah. And you have addressed some other things going on and what happens forward. I am so interested to see. I know you can't talk about this enough, in my opinion. This new offensive coaching staff. I just can't wait to see what goes through camp, before camp even, and mini camps and, the OTAs, and how this new coaching staff is going to kind of take charge. And I just don't think there was enough take charge. I just don't. I think that was like the big thing. And I think that is one problem that will be solved.
I agree. I think this offense is going to be better. And, I think that could make the Saints an interesting team. I don't think they're going to go win 12 games this year.
Yeah, of course not.
But like, I think they will at least, you've seen these like McVay, Shanahan offenses unlock quarterbacks, right? Like everywhere they've gone, they've maximized quarterbacks. So like, I think it's good to get Derek Carr out of the West Coast offense that he's been in forever and put him in something new that takes advantage of all his strengths and hides his weaknesses. I think you could see a lot better season out of him. So I'm really, really, really interested to see what this looks like, especially like if they get the run game going. I think they could be an interesting team for sure.
It's gonna be a fun rest of the offseason. This is, to me, the draft is when you turn your attention. You forget about last season and you move on and you start looking towards next season. The schedule release is coming up. We'll do plenty on that as well. And we'll We'll talk to you soon, Luke Johnson, and may your Milwaukee Brewers lose like 10 or 12 in a row.
As long as they don't play the Yankees again, I'm all right.
Thanks, Luke. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Luke Johnson, everybody. He is always welcome on this show. Brings a lot to what we've got going on here. Always. We're going to have a very special extra point today. Talking about the 2006 draft and specifically to what happened 18 years ago today related to that draft. But first, give me a few seconds to talk about my friends again at Evangeline Securities. It can help you begin the process of analyzing whether it's time to sell your small or mid-sized business. You know, if you have one of those, if you have a small, mid-sized business, are you thinking about retiring or just selling? If you're doing either, then you want to check out our friends at Evangeline. The New Orleans hub is at 909 Poydras Street. You know where that is. You know, you could drunk stumble your way to the Dome from 909 Poydras Street. Watch Alvin Kamara strut in the end zone from their 26th floor office if the roof were open. The managing directors here, Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt, are born and bred in the Crescent City, and both are alums from Jesuit High School. Nick graduated from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, while Ron did the same at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Ron was cheering up and down when Michigan won the national championship game a few months ago. They both spent plenty of time in New York financial circles, each with more than 20 years of experience in investment banking. Let Ron and Nick help you get you on your way. Say that 10 times fast. The next chapter of your life, check them out at www.evangelinesecurities.com to get started. We're going to move on and finish the show with today's extra point. The extra point has been kind of a mixed bag over the last couple of weeks. We've had some like really, really bad moments. We've had some really, really great moments. I don't think I've had a whole lot of in between, but we don't have time for in between here. We only have time for great or stank. This one's great. Go back 18 years to the first draft of the Sean Payton era. What a draft it was. Roman Harper, Zach Strief, Marcus Colston in the 7th round. Oh, and the second pick overall. The Saints made a rare splash, taking the Heisman Trophy winner. That's right, the Heisman Trophy when it's got its damn Heisman back. Don't get me started on that. Reggie Bush. He lived up to that hype. Good thing the Houston Texans' Gabe Henderson needed defense and chose NC State's Mario Williams with the first overall pick in 2006 and left Bush for the Saints. He became Drew Brees' first real security blanket in New Orleans, with Bush becoming the first to help Peyton and Brees perfect that screen pass, dump off that Pierre Thomas later became so great at. Bush would finish his rookie season with more than 1,300 yards from scrimmage, including 88 receptions and 8 touchdowns. The blueprint for Alvin Kamara, right? He would spend 5 seasons in New Orleans before heading off to Miami, Detroit, and briefly in San Francisco and Buffalo. There are plenty of memories with Reggie, but the one I will take with me was one when he wasn't even on the field to play. It was the NFC Championship game in January 2010 when Garrett Hartley was lining up for the game-winning field goal. Remember? Just one time for your boy. Just one time for your boy. And then Hartley made pigs fly while Reggie was knocking down Gumbo before the team headed to Miami for their one and only Super Bowl title. Good times. Great pick. And a great show. That is going to wrap it up for this show. This Monday. Bad weather outside, a whole lot of fun inside. That's how we do it here on Dattitude. I want to thank today's guest, Luke Johnson, and of course, Gabe Henderson behind the scenes. He was saying all kinds of things back there that I can't repeat on the show, but that's okay. When I talked about Mario Williams, he's not a fan, I don't think. That's okay. No one was. We will be back on Wednesday. We told you we're going to talk to Taryn Walk, beat writer for Atlanta Falcons. I think it's AtlantaFalcons.com. Dirty Birds. Maybe it's the beat writer for MichaelPenix.com. I don't know. But we're going to talk to her and get her opinion on the Falcons draft, Michael Penix, and, of course, the hierarchy of the NFC South. That will be fun on Wednesday. No show on Friday. A reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page and click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You can also find a replay of the show on NOLA.com/sports. We will see you on Wednesday. Everybody have a great one. Take it easy, my friends.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.